Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Daily Fix. I am your usual host and presenter, Advocate Tudo Hoyani. You'll recall that a day or two ago, I told you about that private investigator that I met or had a discussion with on WhatsApp. That is how I met this particular gentleman. We first met through a comment that he made, and remember he said that, and then I gave him my WhatsApp number, and he came back to me by WhatsApp, and this is how I am now in possession of information that he's now relaying to me. Let me indicate that the private investigator tells me that he has not been engaged by the Meyiwa family. He is doing this, merely out of interest. And he says to me that it's not been very easy to access some of the information that he has got, but he would also wish at this stage to remain anonymous. And I'm also not very, comfortable to disclose his name at this stage, because sometimes, it can endanger people's lives to come up with their names. It suffices for the purposes of this video to say that, he is from Foslo Ras, or he lives in Foslo Ras. So he went a little bit further to elaborate on what is going on around the Meyiwa trial. And the specific focus that we are on was the question of how come two dockets were opened in respect of one murder investigation. He says the first police officers on the scene were clearly misled. They were given wrong information that there had been intruders into that house. That is the first most crucial thing that he makes. And this is not the first person who has told me this. Former Constable Tapadim has told me that as one of the investigators. When they arrived on the scene, they were told that there had been intruders into that house, and that those intruders had shot Senzo Meyiwa and simply ran away into the night. You'll recall that Constable Tapadima also said that teams were dispatched to 3 different provinces. First province, I think, was Limpopo. The second one was Mpumalanga, and the third team was dispatched to KZN. So what this private investigator tells me now gets corroborated by what Constable Tapadima, former Constable Tapadima, tells me, in terms of the fact that they were simply misled to run in all sorts of directions instead of focusing on the house and treating the house as a crime scene, and in fact treating the people in the house as suspects, because these were the closest people to Senzo at the time that he died, and the investigation should have been intense on them, right? So that any leads that are pursued thereafter can only be done after an exhaustive investigation of the people who were in the house, the crime scene itself, and all other attendant matters. So he tells me that his investigations have revealed that indeed the investigators, were just thrown a red herring. They were just totally, misled to think that there were intruders into that house. But he also delves into a very controversial issue, which also came up, remember, in that letter that, or in the statement that Longo made to Tifo while they were in prison, where Longo confessed about what happened shortly after Senzo Meyiwa was killed. You'll recall that Longwe said there was a meeting at the Khumalo house. Now let me get back to the private investigator. The private investigator says that was the beginning of docket 636. A meeting was conveyed in the Khumalo house, and he simply says to me, all those people who were there when Senzo passed away were part of that meeting. And when I pressed him further to say who was also there, he said the people behind 636, docket 636. He did not want to mention them by name, but we all know who is behind, the narrative of 636. So it was like virtually naming them because they are all known to all of us. So he said that in that meeting, there was also present Chico Twala. Chico Twala was present in that meeting. And he tells me that after it had become apparent that this was an accidental shooting, either by Kelly Khumalo or by Longwe Twala. But certainly, there was agreement that this was an accidental shooting. The most important issue now was to say, where did this gun come from? The gun that was used in the shooting of Senzo Meyiwa. It then became abundantly clear that that gun had been brought to that house by Longwe Twala. It also became abundantly clear that that was a gun that Longwe had stolen from his father, and that unknown to his father, he had brought this firearm to the Khumalo house. And it was established that the killing or the shooting of Senzo was a mistake. This is why he says the first news that everybody heard in Vosloorus on the night that Senzo died and the following morning and subsequent days thereafter was that there had been an accidental shooting in that house. But it would appear that at that meeting, certain decisions were made. He continues. This is a private investigator. Certain decisions were made that the whole narrative had to be changed. Of course, to protect, the origins of that gun. I've already told you where that gun came from. The origins of that gun and how that gun came to be in that house. And also to protect whoever it was. And we all know that it is either Kelly Khumalo or Longwe Twala. Whoever it was that had fired those fatal bullets that ended up taking Senzo's life. So, Longwe Twala has confirmed in the letter to Tefo that the statement that he made to Tefo when he was in prison, everybody was then instructed not to say anything to the Vosloorus police because there was still this uncertainty as to whether, these people who were in the house could be relied upon to stick to the intruder theory. So he says that is where docket 636 emanated. It was simply made up in order to protect certain individuals who are directly implicated in the killing of Senzo Meyiwa. This is why he says we're in this mess. He tells me that there need not have been. He said to me, you ask any of the investigators of this matter. There need not have been any need to open two dockets. Had the people in the house been honest enough after Senzo was accidentally shot in the Kumalo house to say, let us report this matter to the police just as it happened. He says it will make things much, much easier for everybody. And indeed for the people who were in the house. Because an accidental shooting, I know as an advocate, would amount to something like culpable homicide, the unintentional shooting of a human being. And certainly, it was, on the face of it, an accidental shooting. But he then says, you see, what has complicated it is for people to run away from that responsibility and start inventing fanciful stories about there having been intruders into that house. So that is the birth of 636, as I discussed it with this private investigator. The man has got quite a lot. I know some of you will say, who is he? Does he really exist? Can we rely on this kind of information? But you ask Patricia Mashale. Some of this information is provided by whistleblowers. And whistleblowers really need our protection. Just for the sake of divulging the name, I will not try and popularize the Daily Fix at the expense of that man's life to say his name is so and so. Right? So it does not help, to be throwing his name all over social media, because what we are interested in is not really the individual himself. It is the information that the individual has, which sort of gives us hope that a 375 is indeed the more plausible of the two versions. That meeting, there you have it. The words are not mine, they are the investigators. Thank you very much for watching, and please have a wonderful Human Rights Day.